Considering how adjectives are used in English, the answer ought to be simply yes. We use adjectives to enrich descriptions of the things we talk about. Adjectives qualify, like the scorching sun, or specify, like missed calls. But is that the case with social credit scores? Are they just a social type of credit score? Let's start with a different example to make it clear what's going on. In the phrase the iron throne, iron is used literally to specify the throne and distinguish it from all the other thrones out there. Whereas in the phrase the porcelain throne, something different is going on. It's not just porcelain that's used to qualify, the noun is also descriptive of the toilet, which in good taste remains unspoken. The metaphor transfers the qualities of a typical throne, that is, a seat occupied by dignitaries, to our toilet. This interplay between adjective and noun here is interesting, because as the noun is used metaphorically, it lends additional qualities to the unmentioned toilet. In this short, we'll show how a similar metaphoric mechanism is used in the phrase social credit score. As humanists, we ought to keep a critical eye on how meaning is produced. And since language is the primary medium through which meaning is constructed and disseminated, it therefore offers an excellent lens to appraise how new policies and technologies are framed. Language is beautiful that way. It's open to anyone's inspection. You don't need access to confidential documents to know the way the wind is blowing or how the strings are pulled. A close and critical read can be simply revelationary. Okay, back to social credit scores. So, credit comes from the Latin "he, it believes." Specifically, it's the belief that an entity can be granted a loan because they can be reasonably trusted to repay that loan. So, credit isn't an account balance or the borrowed sum, but rather the amount someone would be trusted to borrow. It's this sense of credit which entered the English language in the 16th century. While it may be that a person's credit is informed by intangibles, it manifests as a quantifiable sum placed at a person's disposal. Up until the 1950s, though, a person's creditworthiness also incorporated an appraisal of their character. This all but guaranteed that society's prejudices echoed on in companies' lending policies. Yuck. To reduce this bias and get more reliable results, companies started formalizing what made up a person's creditworthiness by building mathematical models. These models produced credit scores and proxy the likelihood a debtor will default, thereby helping companies manage their risk. When the consequences of an action cannot be calculated, decision makers are faced with uncertainty rather than risk. Credit ratings are a practical method to nudge lenders' uncertain decisions into ones where they can quantify the risk. The business motivation here is also clear. If a lender can calculate the percentage of loans that will not be repaid, it can simply adjust the interest rate to the point where they are making up for the losses on those bad loans. So the system helps secure their profitability, and it's really a must-have for lending businesses. The system also has benefits for the public. Individuals with good credit scores can be offered differentiated rates based on their lower likelihood of default. And with reduced systemic uncertainty, more people will now also have access to a loan. And if loan brokers had simply not ignored the risk implied by low credit scores, the financial crash of 2008 might have been avoided entirely. Okay, so credit scores are a tool to reduce the uncertainty of a very specific decision, and the benefits can be passed on to people in the form of lower costs and access. The risk models have become so advanced that they have great predictive power for individuals they have good data on. Just to give you a sense of how credit scores relate to loan repayment rates, let's look at this risk view example, which is a credit score available from LexisNexis. The bad rate on the y-axis shows the percentage of loans which defaulted, given the risk view score bracket on the x-axis. Each trace on the graph represents a different product, and the risk view is calibrated to roughly halve the odds of default for every 40 points that you go up on the scale from 500 to 900. At a glance, it shows that not only is there a strong correlation between credit scores and default rates, it's also robust across product categories. Okay, so let's distill everything we've discussed so far into the 5 characteristics of a credit score. Mathematical models informed by relevant personal attributes. Calibrated to correlate with default rates. Have a predictive application. Managing the risk. May benefit the public with access and lower rates. Now let's see how these 5 factors can be applied to social credit systems. There are about 50 different systems being piloted in the PRC, so we'll just use one of the more publicized ones, which is the one that's been rolled out in RongCheng. In the RongCheng system, all residents started out with 1,000 points. Since then, the authorities have handed out or docked points based on a public list of desirable and undesirable behaviors. For example, disseminating false information in WeChat groups costs 20 points, but reporting a manufacturer of fake or shoddy goods earns a good 30 points. Residents are banded into creditworthiness tiers, with the higher tiers, AAA to B, earn them benefits, while lower tiers, C and D, result in penalties and imposed restrictions. So, do they have a credit score-based system in RongCheng or what? Who or what decides what these relevant personal attributes are? In the case of credit scores, it's simply the attributes which have proven to have explanatory power. So if an attribute improves the accuracy of a model's prediction, it is kept, otherwise it is cut to avoid introducing noise into the model. In RongCheng, the data used to build the scores aren't attributes of a person, but rather instances of behavior. Whereas a typical variable in a credit score would be income or number of years at residence, in RongCheng, a person's score is modified in response to a specific behavior being observed, say, completing 10 hours of volunteering or getting caught forging evidence. So, while credit scores are a quantified snapshot of a specific moment in time, the RongCheng system records events across time. This distinction is of great consequence, as the relevance of attributes can be statistically rationalized for a credit score, but the decision to include behavior remains a discretionary matter of the RongCheng government. Credit scores are calibrated to correlate with default rates. As we saw in the risk view example, an increase of the same magnitude in the score should correspond to a similar magnitude decrease in the odds of default. To achieve this level of precision, each attribute in the model needs to be carefully weighed and given their own importance score. This is achieved by learning not only which attributes affect default rates, but also how strongly they predict them. Having a history of defaulting on your loans will have a much greater predictive power than, say, the number of people in your household. By analyzing a large set of past loan outcomes, the relationship between the attributes which go into the model and the likelihood of default which comes out of the model can be meticulously calibrated with estimations which are both evidence-based and methodological. The provided rationale for the RongCheng system is that it indicates trustworthiness. So the number of points added or deducted should signal a behavior's relationship with trustworthiness. But what's the basis for assigning 100 points for unpaid donation of remains, but deducting 100 points for erecting a tombstone exceeding the height limits? How is this equivalence arrived at? Currently, the point values are arbitrarily set, and as we'll see in the next point, they have to be arbitrarily set, as there is no well-defined objective that is being optimized for. To date, and by design, the RongCheng system does not permit calibration. Credit scores combine a wide range of data sources to predict a very specific future behavior: loan repayment. RongCheng's system doesn't have that single specific future behavior that is being targeted. Instead, its score is a rather vague assertion of trustworthiness. The aim there isn't to predict, but to track and hold people accountable for their behavior. This is exemplified by the public shaming of those individuals who find themselves in the lowest tier. Of course, you can only be shamed for something that you've done in the past, not for something that you're expected to do in the future, at least not yet. The system's design suggests that accountability and enforcement of existing laws are the priority, rather than developing a fair, portable, and reliable metric of trust. So, despite the points-based system implying some kind of numerical precision, without a clear prediction target, neither the attribute choices nor the point values can be validated. This leaves only the most indirect methods of evaluating the efficacy of the system. Credit scores were motivated by finding the relevant facts about a person and attempt to neutralize irrationality and reduce human bias. In the RongCheng system, the government doubles down on what it believes makes a trustworthy citizen. So it's behaving more like lenders did before they turned to credit scores in the 1950s. In RongCheng, the consequences of a poor score impinge on financial access, professional options, and access to governmental benefits. But with a single trustworthiness score, the RongCheng system glosses over the fact that trust isn't portable. You might entrust your darkest secret to a total stranger, but not your money. Whereas you might not even entrust a friend with your darkest secrets, while you wouldn't blink twice to front-end the cash. This is why all the complexity of a credit score are on the data input side of the model. The models are only concerned with establishing trust in a single domain. That's why the output of the model is limited and simple and only describes a person's likelihood to default. Trust is domain-specific, context-dependent, and definitely not as portable as the RongCheng system would suggest. The vagueness of what social credit scores actually stand for means that they can't help deal with uncertainty like credit scores do. So it would be misleading to present it as a risk management tool. The introduction of credit scores opened up lines of credit to larger sections of the population. This of course resulted in its own challenges, especially at the subprime end of the market. But credit scores have been successful in lowering interest rates and making credit more accessible. Now, consider the RongCheng system. As each citizen starts with 1,000 points, we can consider the benefits above that score to be benefits which incentivize good behavior. The benefits include a 200 renminbi contribution towards pension insurance, free health checks, and free public transport. Whereas falling below 960 points might trigger a lecture by a government official on how to improve your credit, dropping below 850 results in tangible penalties such as a reduction of relevant social welfare and being disqualified from winning awards and honors. Further falling below 600 points finally means that you can get entered on a public blacklist and access to loans, rentals, and transportation could be denied. On the whole, the benefits might not be large enough to materially alter behavior, while the penalties range from mild inconveniences to a grave impedance on a person's life. It's perhaps too soon to assess the broader societal impact of the social credit systems, but on the face of it, individuals seem to be punished harder for their transgressions, with the societal benefit being a reduction in those activities which the government deems illegal. So, to conclude, calling the social credit score a credit score is misleading because it prompts people to reapply their knowledge of credit scores without it being merited. Like the porcelain throne, the phrase social credit score works metaphorically. The adjectives and noun add their shades of meaning but never explicitly name their target. The choice of wording in government policy is always deliberate. The choice here means that the positive characteristics of credit scores are projected onto something that's fundamentally different. while its use can be presented as risk management for the public's benefit. As humanists, we should endeavor to critically reflect on the names authorities give their initiatives. Because, as someone familiar with Chinese politics once said, the first measure to improve the administration is certainly to correct language and rectify names. As for a better name, what about this civic record? Because while it does account for some civically desirable behavior, it remains much closer in spirit to a criminal record than a credit score.